We're going to continue the series on the faces of addiction. And we're talking a lot tonight about fantasy addiction, which is centralized around a major word called shame. So I want to kind of do a reading based on shame from the language of letting go. It's from June 5th, by the way. Shame can hold us back, hold us down, and keep us staring at our feet. Watch out for shame. Many systems and people reek of shame. They are controlled by shame. They want us to play their game with them. They're hoping to hook us and control us through shame. Compulsive behaviors, sexually addictive behaviors, overeating, chemical abuse, and addictive gambling are some of the shame-based behaviors. If we participate in them, we will feel ashamed. It's inevitable. Need to watch out for the addictive and compulsive behaviors because those will immerse us in shame. Many of us have gotten messages back to original shame from our past, and some of those messages kind of built shame inside of us. Don't think, don't feel, don't grow, don't change, don't be alive, be ashamed. Be done with shame, attack it, go to war with it, learn to recognize it, and avoid it like the plague. They will deliberately refuse to get caught up in the shame floating around in the world. If I cannot resist it, I will feel it, accept it, and be done with it as quickly as possible. God, please, help me know it's okay to love myself. Help me to refuse to submit to any elements of shame. I wanted to read that tonight because we're going to talk a lot tonight about kind of a tough little addiction called fantasy addictions. And it's pretty powerful. I mentioned some of them last week. Just to summarize them quickly, and I'll get into them. We mentioned drugs and alcohol, the unmanageability of drugs and alcohol, sexual addiction, relationship addictions, work, gambling, bulimia, power addictions, power addictions, narcissism, shoplifting, pedophiles. Many of these things come under the aspects of shame. So I want to talk a lot about what I call the map of shame and abuse, and begin to realize where the foundations of these come from and some of the ways in which we hope to deal with them. One of the things about these addictions, which are very powerful, I want to talk about a word I think we have to try to understand. The word is disassociation. What happens a lot of times with these types of addictions, because they're built around the concept of a lie, and I'll kind of share how this happens. Many people that migrate towards these addictions are people that in their childhood have experienced major forms of abuse. These are children that may have can't get it out. These are children that may have experienced sexual abuse. These are kids that come from homes where there's a lot of insanity and a lot of craziness. And so as a result, abuse is normal to them. But as children, in order to survive, they have learned how to make up stories. They have learned how to create things that really aren't real. And the bottom line is they literally do these so nobody knows what's really going on, because secrets are a big part of shame-based addictions. And it's interesting because so many times we have a tendency, as we tell these stories over and over again, we then start to believe them. And then after a while, we start telling them to others. And after a while, we create a concept of ourselves that really isn't real. Because what am I doing? I'm hiding what's deep down inside of me. I'm hiding the hurt, the pain, the abuse. And many abusers either become abusers, and many times they also may end up being victims. So the concept is we see both sides of it. When we talk about shame, we also remember that disassociation is something that's very hard to understand. I'll try to explain it. It's almost like when I'm in my element of my addiction, I function in a certain way. When I'm in my element of the other side of me, I basically function differently. A good example of this are pedophiles. I'll kind of show you what I mean. When I was a priest, I lived with a gentleman for over 6 years who was, to the outside world, he appeared to be all together. He appeared like he had his act all together. He was in charge of the youth programs. He was a basketball nut. He was big into sports, everything, the whole works. But he had a secret life. And that secret life no one knew about. And usually when it comes down to it, when he's in his sick life as a pedophile, his real life doesn't exist. Then he goes into his real life and blocks out the other part of what's going on. It's almost like a double personality, and it's scary. Because what happens after a period of time, it almost becomes like a normal to you to live this two-sided life. We see this with drugs and alcohol too. Addicts, a lot of times when they're in major addiction, and basically their life is unmanageable. And anytime you try to confront them or deal with them, they immediately want to blame you. See, it's not me, it's you. It's always you, not me. So always find somebody to blame. So what I do is when I can't handle the shame or deal with what I have to deal with, I try to put it on to somebody else. And as a result, then, I hope that you'll take it. We see this many times in other areas of addiction too. Gambling, sex addiction, all these different areas. But one of the biggest areas, of course, is in power addictions and narcissism, where basically enough is never enough, where control is a big part of it, where it's got to be my way or the highway. And as a result, then, literally what I'm doing is I literally am using you to manipulate what's really going on inside of me. Shame has so many faces and so many ways in which it can manifest itself and show itself. But again, we look at this and we realize so much of this is, we use a term sometimes called Napoleon complex, where literally I have such a poor image of myself as a person that I try to portray an image of somebody else. I try to portray that everything's okay. Like the person that has no money in poverty, and they try to make believe they have a lot of stuff. They're always telling lies. They're always creating a world that doesn't exist. And as a result, then, there's a certain amount of high and insanity and craziness that goes along with this. And that's why it's scary to understand, because basically we migrate towards these addictions because deep down inside, we have no real good image of ourselves as a person. And so literally on the outside, I try to create something I'm not to be able to survive. These are survivor skills. We get caught up in them. And it's interesting because one of the things we find, you heard this in recovery a lot of times, we're as sick as our secrets. And so many times in the course of our concept, our secrets have kept us sick because basically we have to keep them secret. And one of the things I bring out is some of the things that are underneath these addictions. Grandiosity, where basically I constantly have to prove that I'm better than anybody else, that I got it together. Everything's wonderful and great. I never have any problems, but deep down inside I'm loaded with problems. Other things such as worthlessness, that I create images because I have a sense of worthlessness inside of myself. Other things like arrogance, self-centeredness. Once I begin to lie to myself, I begin to believe my own lies. I then start to lie to others. And as a result, then I begin to live the lie. And literally it becomes a way in which I function and get through life. These addictions are scary because so many times they have a tendency to really get caught up in blaming others too. You take an example for gambling. You can confront a gambler, but a gambler will look at you and tell you everything's wonderful, everything's great, I'll take care of everything, not a problem, even though there's tons of problems. Things will be falling apart all around them. But really, in reality, they create this image that everything's wonderful and great. Addicts do the exact same thing. So it's the whole concept that I really have to make sure you see me as being together, even though I'm not together. And so as a result, I literally am able to manipulate, able to con, I'm able to bring things through. So we see this a lot of times in power addictions, where, I literally, deep down inside, this is narcissism, where literally, I am the only one that can do it. Nobody else can do it. I have everything under control. I can handle anything. When deep down inside, I have this emptiness. Where does this come from? Many times as children, sometimes these are little boys or little girls. The example, a little boy that's constantly put down, that's constantly told he's no good, he'll never amount to anything, who's constantly pushed into the ground and basically bullied. And as a result, then I have to prove to the world that I am somebody. And so very many times I may create this image, and then as a result, I have to live the image. Something about lying is very powerful. Once you start telling lies, then basically you have to start believing the lies, and then you have to start living the lies. And then one lie leads to another lie, and it's scary. I share all this with you about shame and about guilt and about the things that we feel in these particular addictions, because there's a lot of fear involved in it also. Again, the interesting thing about all these addictions, they're addictions that have a lot of insanity and a lot of craziness in them. They're addictions where basically people get a rush, they get a high from them. And as a result, then they literally are avoiding having to go inside and look at themselves. I mean, how do they get into recovery? How do we fight these addictions? One of the ways I share with people all the time is, and it's unfortunate, these are usually situations where somebody has to create some sort of a problem where literally they're forced to get into recovery. It's interesting when you look at many of these where people literally have to almost get down to the level of almost death till they finally are forced into dealing with it. You see, I use examples a lot of times. I work with a couple that lived in California, and it was a model couple. The husband had a fantastic job, made good money. The wife was the pillar of the community, PTA, everything else. But quietly, she had a secret life. She was a very expensive call girl, 18 hours a week. No one had any idea what was going on. This went on for a long period of time until finally she picked up the wrong person and got exposed. Then all of a sudden, this pillar of a family collapsed, it fell apart. And they actually had to move to another state to be able to get treatment because of all the publicity and stuff that went along with it. It's scary because literally it's almost like you have to literally almost fall apart and go right to that bottom before you begin the real process of getting help. And again, so many times it's because of a lot of hurt and pain that you create. And therefore the recovery process is a tough process and yet a good one. I share this with you because I really believe deeply that these addictions can be worked with. And these addictions are very powerful and very beautiful because they really can bring you to another side. They can bring you to a beautiful sense of recovery. I've seen the miracles in so many ways, in so many places. It's just amazing. But again, it's almost like the ego has to be defeated. Somehow the ego has to be brought down. And what the scary thing about it is, once the person begins to fall apart, then they have to lash out at everybody else, get angry, go through changes, and literally constantly try to do the element of control and the element of, see, it's funny how people that were bullied then become the bully and begin to act the exact same way. Because again, it's their normal, it's where they were raised, how they were brought up. And as a result, then, very basically, there's a lot of sickness involved in this, a lot of shame involved in it. And yet the recovery means they need therapy, need to be able to do their work. It's a process, it's a long process, but also, thank God, we have a lot of beautiful 12-step programs to deal with these. Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. We have Sexaholics Anonymous. We have all different types of programs. Okay, we have things where people can get help and get direction in this because we're dealing with diseases. And again, so many times in society, these particular diseases are not looked upon. They're looked upon negatively. And very many times they get bad press and bad publicity. And as a result, then, very many times people put people down with these addictions when really in reality they're sick. We have to realize that and realize the fact that it is a long road to recovery and yet a beautiful road to recovery. Now, I'll give you another example of what I'm talking about when it comes into these types of addictions. And I want to talk just for a couple of minutes, once again, about the concept of sexual addiction. I had a lady come to Starting Point. She was probably about 35 years old, a very good looking woman. And she brought her husband in with her. Her husband was sitting in the corner and she said to me, and I didn't really know how to answer this. She said, "Take a look at me, Vince. Is there anything wrong with me?" I kind of took a step back and I said, well, what do you mean? Well, look at me. I'm a good looking woman. I don't understand it. See that man? He won't come near me. We have 3 kids. He won't touch me. He stays downstairs in his room watching pornography in chat rooms and stuff to that effect. And I tried to explain something to her. I said, the thing you don't understand is that when he was dating you, you were the excitement. You were a rush. You were a high. You got married. There was the excitement. And then the invaders came along. They were called children. And then all of a sudden, everything changed. And the Russian high was gone. So you had to go get the Russian high someplace else. It's not about you. It's about the sickness that's inside of him. And in recovery, we had to put him into a treatment process, which for that particular addiction can take up to 6 months to a year. And we had to work with her because the family needs a lot of work to be able to understand it, to be able to develop with it. And this is the same example in gambling. It's the same example in all these different areas. And they're tough to work with until the ego actually falls apart, until they actually come to that point where they have no choice but to get help. It's like the bottom. We're talking about that. It's like pedophiles when they finally get caught. Then they have to deal with the fallout and all the other stuff that goes along with it. So again, they're diseases that in society are looked down upon. At the same time, though, they're diseases that can be treated. And there are diseases that literally have a lot of parameters, a lot of barriers on them because and here's the thing that's really different about these diseases. Many times they have to be monitored and they have to have good, strong, healthy recovery programs. And that's why there's a good process involved in this. And so, yeah, I've seen the miracles. I've seen people come out on the other side. I've seen people so many times have to go through a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, and yet go back to the roots and the foundations and take a look at where does this come from. One of the toughest ones to work with are the power addictions, where literally my life is centralized around power and control. And as a result, then anybody who criticizes me becomes the enemy. Anybody who's different than me becomes the enemy. And that's why so many times I have to be able to domineer and control everything because I'm the only one, because I have the answers to everything. And it gets scary when you get caught up in that obsession, that craziness, and that insanity. It can create a lot of havoc, a lot of craziness. And at the same time, what happens then is it literally affects everybody around them, the family, sometimes the community, sometimes the neighborhood. Basically, we see all kinds of scandal and stuff that can come from these addictions. It's a real scary concept that goes along with it. And one of the areas too, you know, and people don't talk too much about this addiction, is shoplifting. There's a rush and an excitement to it, getting away with something, doing things that are crazy or insane, even though you don't need to do them. I always tell the story, this is another true story of a lady who was very well off. She went to Walmart. You're familiar with Walmart, and it's going back a few years now, so don't. And she bought a stereo set. Remember stereo sets? Some of the younger ones here may not remember them, but they bought a stereo set. When she got home and opened it up and took it out, there were two knobs missing from the stereo set. Now, it's Walmart. What do? Put the stuff back in the box, bring it back to Walmart, and they give you a new one, right? No. A shoplifter is somebody that basically, here comes the excitement. I'm going to go to ShopRite, and I'm going to wait till nobody's looking. And I'm going to take two knobs off of the sets that are on display. There's an excitement, there's a rush, there's a high to that. I know it sounds crazy, but of course they have cameras and she gets caught. Next thing you know, the husband's there. He can't figure out what's wrong with this crazy lady, the whole concept of it. And as a result, then all of a sudden there's the embarrassment, all the other stuff that goes along with it. And it's scary stuff. But it's like an obsession that gets inside of you. And it's almost like I'm looking constantly. Same when it comes to relationships. I'm not really interested in relationships. I like clandestine relationships. So it comes down to, if I can't have you, then I want you. But if you become available, get lost. You see, I can't handle the word commitment. As a result, then I burn my way through relationships. I use people, manipulate people. And it's sad. I even hate giving this lecture a lot of times because it's a rough one. These addictions are rough addictions to deal with. And I've seen over the years working with people like this. It's a lot of patience, a lot of time, and a lot of effort. But I've learned not to give up, to help people through the process, to see where they can go with it. And I have a lot of gratitude to see some of the people who have come through who are then able to go back and help others and share their stories with others. Sometimes people, because of these addictions, have to do prison time. And sometimes, unfortunately, we have people, when they're discovered, that real basically sometimes actually commit suicide as a result of it, because their secret is now out. There's a lot of embarrassment that goes along with shame. I say this to you because I really care about all of you. Shame is one of the most powerful things on the face of this earth. And shame literally can rip you to shreds on the inside. And really, in reality, it's scary because basically, sometimes deep down inside, I just want to be able to break this cycle. I have a hard time breaking it because I'm so much caught up in it. And the scary thing about this stuff, even the legal stuff and stuff to this effect, I get caught up in it. You see a lot of this in the concept of the old time gangsters and stuff to this effect. Once they get caught up in this, there's like a rush, a high, craziness, and insanity. Even though they can say things like, it's only a job, it's business. Prostitutes say the exact same thing. But it's the concept is, I'm used to this. It becomes normal to me. Remember one time I did an intake evaluation with two young ladies. They came in the starting point and they wanted to get into recovery. They just got into drug and alcohol recovery, and they wanted to work in different areas. And they're having a problem. I wanted to talk to them about it. And they said to me, Vince, when we were expensive call girls, we were making close to $2,000 a week. Now, because I'm in recovery and my life has changed, we have jobs where we make $15 an hour, $20 an hour. My entire lifestyle has changed completely. I'm not complaining about that. but it's really difficult to get used to it. It's very difficult to make the transition. And that's one of the things I want to share with you. That once people do get into recovery, it's almost like they have to do a tremendous transition. It's like starting life all over again and being able to stay away from the obsession. They may have to have a lot of restrictions on them to help them through this process. And sometimes they even have to have monitors and people to work with them. Sometimes, they may have to pay back some powerful bills and make some powerful amends. A lot of things they have to do. And thank God for the 12 steps in the process of recovery. I believe very deeply that if people really do get to the point where they want recovery, recovery does work. It doesn't work overnight. It's hard work. There's a lot of patience involved in it, a lot of restructuring, a lot of change, a lot of moving in new directions, learning new ways of life. It's almost like starting all over again. And yet deep down inside, there's always that feeling, that excitement, because I've gotten so addicted to the excitement and the insanity. And that's where they got to go back to the roots of where the abuse, where the foundations for this addiction came from. And that takes time to get to that root, to be able to pull that root out and begin to see a change take place. So again, one of the things I find is they really need to be able to be connected with people to help people in recovery. And of course, I know when you live a secret life, after you live it for a long period of time, it's so difficult to come to the other side. I see this so many times, even in the prison system when I was a prison chaplain. Prisoners that came in, they had a conversion overnight, especially conversions to God. They found the light. They found this, they found that. Really what they're doing is they're trying to find something to not have to feel what's going on deep inside of them, to see the aspects of what happened in their life. There's also a lot of embarrassment and a lot of shame involved in that too. One of the things I talk a lot about, and I'll do more about this when I do the series on shame and shame reduction. Shame is a powerful force. And I've seen how it can destroy so many people, especially if you bury yourself in it. But really, in reality, the more you have to be able to face it and deal with it, and once you're able to finally face shame and embrace it, not that you can get rid of it, it's part of your history, but you can reduce it down to a level where you can do something about it and begin to open up the doors of recovery, which are really important. I share this with you because I want you to try to understand these addictions and understand them from the point of view of being able to realize they're addictions like any other addictions, and they're scary sometimes. And yes, there's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain involved in it. And yet, recovery is something that can really happen, but a little bit at a time, patience, time to work through things. People can come out on the other side. No matter how serious the situation is, I've learned in my own recovery and working with people, you never give up. You just keep hoping that you plant seeds and hope that eventually they'll be developed. And in time, many times they will. These are also diseases that you can experience relapses sometimes. They got to come back. There's no magic to it. And that's why it's important to be people of prayer, to be able to help people through this process and make them begin to understand the beauty of what life can really be. And one of the things I realize a lot of times is that sometimes because how we look at these things in society, and literally when doors open up in that direction, really the concept is they then begin to really fall apart. And as a result, the embarrassment, the shame gets intensified. And that's where the healing has to take place. And some of these addictions, not all of them, but some of them there have to be geographical changes too sometimes to be able to start anew and start over again, which is a big part of it. And that's really important when you come right down to it. So I wanted to share that with you because in my prayer tonight, I want you to try to come to an understanding and come to really have a sense deep down inside to be able to realize that these are diseases and they do affect society in general. They affect all of us. And as a result, then we have to learn to be people of forgiveness and people of healing and be able to work and help people through their process. Unfortunately, for some people, they may not be able to turn that corner. And for some people, it can be scary. So the process is all we can do is pray and hope and give things to God and ask the higher power to guide us. So my prayer tonight will do that and see where we can kind of take this in recovery. So let us pray. God, we come before you tonight in prayer. We ask the God of our understanding, our divine presence, to be open, to help us, and to guide us as we go on this journey of life. We understand the many things that happen on this journey. Some things maybe we'll be able to understand and some we won't. But let us try to look at life and people that we meet in life with compassion, to look upon them with a sense of healing, a sense of forgiveness and love. To be able to realize that deep down inside, these addictions may scar us, and yet if we're able to, with your help, your guidance and your direction, and then when we ask for your help and guidance, you always send messengers and teachers to help us and guide us on our journey. And so we ask for this, Lord. We ask that you will guide us, be with us, and help us as we continue this journey of healing, this journey of learning, this journey of love. For you are truly a great healer. You are truly the one that is able to touch us and reach us and help us to be able to look at life and learn from the elements of life and the mistakes that we make. Teach us to be able to look deep within to the foundations of where stuff comes from and be able to do a healing and be able to realize that with your help and guidance, everything is possible. So we pray and we ask this and we ask for this in your name. And we ask that may be guided and strengthened in all that we do. So thank you. And we ask this blessing that will upon all of us. And we thank you every day in the course of our journey in life. We ask this in your name. Amen.